Greetings, everybody. Richard here, and I'm excited to go into Taylor Swift's chart with you. Now, we don't know her exact birth time. However, I'm pretty sure she was born somewhere between about 7:30 and 9:30 a.m., and I'm going to make my argument for why this particular time is her chart because as we'll see, there are a lot of very powerful combos in this chart. Now, before I start, don't forget to please click subscribe. And also, should you want a reading with me, I professionally give readings multiple a day. So you can book all of that through my website. That link is given below in the video description. So, without further ado, now I realize a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but I'm going to make my case for this time. This is also the time that my teacher uses, and I feel like it's very accurate. Now, I believe that Taylor Swift is this Sagittarius Lagna, this rising sign, because when you look at her, she carries that sense of dharma and truth and sort of like justness that I feel a Sagittarius would. Meaning, she's not somebody who's flaunting her body. She's obviously a very pretty woman. And yet, she's not like a lot of other people, men and women alike, just like flaunting their body, flaunting their sexuality. She's actually quite conservative in that way. Meaning, you can see images of her where, or videos of her where she's getting a photo taken with a fan, and she's kind of actually covering herself up. This is indicative of that Sagittarius Lagna. It's not one that is Venus ruled or is racier or more just showing of oneself. The Sagittarius would be a little more conservative in that way, or a little more private, perhaps is the right word. Not flaunting themselves or overly showing themselves. Now, so she's this Sagittarius individual. Her ruling planet is Jupiter, and it goes to Gemini. Gemini is, amongst other things, a sign of writing, of skill with hands. It would also make someone sort of eternally youthful, fun, and playful. Now, this is sort of a double hit because her moon, as we see, her moon is also in Gemini. Again, fun, playful, spontaneous, and again, the writer, the skill with hands, the philosophical one. Geminis are very philosophical. And, as this would factor into her relationships, because everyone knows about her relationships apparently, everyone but me, is that this, when you have Gemini, those strengths I listed earlier are wonderful. The flip side of Gemini is that it's the most dual Rashi or constellation. This means that she would be the most dual-minded about three things in particular: home, partner, and career. And this seems to be having an effect on her relationship life. Now, this lunar constellation she's born under is Ardra. It is noted for a pronounced sense of search for self-discovery. Who am I? And also this profound sense of weeping. Apparently, I've been told that she herself has said that it's very easy for her to cry. And indeed, for people with this placement where her moon and her ruling planet both sit, it's like crying is medicine. Because there is this search for the self. There's this sense of who am I? The deity for Ardra, Rudra, when he was born, he's the wailer, he's often referred to as. He wept because he didn't know his name, right? So there's this search for self that is often in Ardra native's life, and it is marked with a sense of weeping, emotion, but in a healthy way. Now, one of the absolute strongest features of this chart that just sets it a chart, and why I'm pretty sure this is her chart, is this what we would call sambandha between Jupiter, her ruling planet, and Mercury up here. There are lots of strong things in this chart, but this is by far the strongest, because this Jupiter and Mercury, one, they have mutual drishti, we say, so they're gazing at each other. This is a premier success combination in this chart because it creates a 1-7 Dharma Karma Adhipati Yoga, this DKA yoga for success. That same combination makes a 1-10 yoga for success. And she has both of them. Now, what's really amazing about this chart is that it makes 2 DKAs, but that sambandha with them gazing, it is reinforced and even amplified because these 2 planets are also in a parivartana yoga. Now, this is like a revolving yoga in a way of like, I'm at your house and you're also at my house and both houses benefit. Well, Jupiter is in Mercury's house and Mercury is in Jupiter's house. So they're flipping places, which creates a bond. So Jupiter and Mercury, you could say it's a bit of like a super sambandha in a way because they're so bonded together. Now, this means that these yogas that they make, these combinations for success, are extra strong, which is obviously the case for her. Now, also, one of the big things here is it's interesting that the Lord of the 7th house of partner goes where? It goes to her 1st house. When this happens, people, they end a relationship and bam, they enter into one right away. Even when they're like, yeah, I'm done dating. I'm not gonna, I'm finished with it. I'm gonna give myself a break for a while. It's like impossible for them to do this. Now, this seems to be, the case. I'm not one to follow famous people's lives, but it seems like there's been relationship after relationship after relationship after relationship. Now, also what this does is it does give her a very strong bond because that Mercury owns her 7th house of partner. That Jupiter, obviously, that's her. And that the fact that they're not only in an exchange, or gazing, they're mutual drishti, they're gazing at each other. But on top of that, they have that parivartana yoga where they're trading places. So there's an extremely strong bond here. And I think for Taylor, this would manifest as way more than a desire, but an innate occurrence where she just connects with people. She connects with people so strongly that she can't help it. So not only is that 7th lord in her 1st house, which brings that to her, because planets placed in the 1st house, those things are brought to you. But look, her moon and her Jupiter both go to the 7th house in turn. Now, there are lots of things to discuss here. One thing that's very interesting is that this DKA yoga we were talking about, that's so powerful, this Jupiter and Mercury. Now, it's powerful from her lagna, the Udaya lagna, her Sagittarius in her case, but it also repeats from the Chandra lagna, from the moon. This is massive. So if you studied Vedic astrology, and in particular yogas, when the yogas occur from the moon and the regular lagna and sometimes the sun, they don't occur here from the sun, but in that case, that's a very powerful yoga. Now, so that DKA is dominating her chart. Now, guess what? What phase is she running right now? This is the magic of this lagna and why I believe this is her chart. If you look down here, look, Saturn, Mercury. She is running that Mercury right now. So it activates all of her stuff. Like, she is arguably more powerful now than she was at any other time in her career. And if you dial back the Dasha here, this is where it gets really interesting. Look what came before her Saturn period. So she's in her Saturn major period. That Saturn was preceded by, guess what? Jupiter, the planet that just directly activates all of these powerful combos in her chart. So we see she's in Saturn now, and she's very popular because that Mercury is activated. So one thing I'd like to point out is that even though I'm not one to follow her per se, she's clearly a really good writer. And she's been a writer for a long time. You can see clips of her when she was very young, like a young teenager writing her own songs. So let's make the case for this in this chart. One is that her ruling planet and her moon are both in Gemini. Geminis are always great writers. They have great skill with hands. They typically have good dexterity. So they can be artists, writers. Most Geminis are great journalists at the very least, and or artists. The vast majority of them are. So the fact that her ruling planet and the moon are in Gemini is a massive hit. But look, Mercury, the planet that rules, guess what? Writing. Here it also rules the house of career, and as I mentioned earlier, the house of partner. This planet of writing is in her ascendant. That is very, very powerful. Guess what else is in her ascendant? Saturn. Now, a lot of people will hate on Saturn, but look, Saturn owns, guess what in this chart? It owns the house of writing. Again, it's in the Lagna. There is so much here for her being a great writer, skill with hands, that it's phenomenal, actually. And yes, having the second lord of the face here, Saturn also in the ascendant, will also create a situation where one is seen. We see a prominent second house in a lot of movie stars charts, in a lot of just TV personalities, artists, movie stars, etc., musicians, because they're seen, right? Because they're seen. So in this chart here, she's a phenomenal writer. She has great success combinations that are directly activated right now. She has, also, so regarding her relationships, I think this is one of the important things, is that two big things that are marks against her relationships, and also share one thing that is a strength for her relationships. The strength I mentioned before, this Parivartana Yoga creates this sambandha, this bond. She has an innate ability to just connect to people. And I'm sure when she meets somebody new, if she's single, that she feels this overwhelming connection to people, right? It must be so strong. Now, this is wonderful. This creates, in a way, a bit of a 1-1 alignment. And that's great, that's very strong. Now, let's talk about two marks against relationship for her. One is that her Venus sits with Rahu. Venus is the Kataka, the significator of love. So when Venus is sitting with Rahu, especially when Venus is behind Rahu technically and not past it, there's a very real difference between when a planet is before or after the nodes. It's behind Rahu. It creates a bit of a volatility in love. And the way to channel this, so if Taylor is watching this, so Taylor, if you see this, just, you can book a consultation with me. I won't tell anybody you did a reading with me. But Venus and Rahu creates a situation where you need to channel this outsider influence. It makes it to where there's a lot of space in a relationship. The person could be a foreigner. There could be a huge age difference, or larger than average age gap at least. There's a lot of travel, certainly the case with her, where there's space there. And even separate rooms. Like, people who have Venus and Rahu, they need to have space, even if they have separate rooms. It's just how you make it work. Otherwise, a Venus Rahu person can have a sense of things happening to them from the outside that they can't help, that impact a relationship. Now, also, this Venus Rahu is kind of like, it's the one of my teachers, Penny. always calls this the fatal attraction combination. So, this is like the fatal attraction combination where people can have a very powerful sense of their sexuality, even if they aren't flaunting it, that people are very attracted to them. And this is where, in the house of her face and voice of all places. So that's fascinating. So that's a wild one that takes some time to learn how to channel. Now, also, she has Jupiter in her seventh house. Now, this is very significant because we would say in Sanskrit, this is Karko Bhavanasha, or the destruction of the house. To have the Karaka, the significator, which in a woman's chart is Jupiter. Jupiter signifies the partner. To have that planet in that house, it creates a bit of an erosion of that house. So there is a little bit of this uphill battle in relationships that she will have to fight. It might not always be there, but certainly she experiences that. Also, the fact that the Karaka, the significator of partner, Jupiter in her chart, is in Ardra. One interpretation of Ardra is that when people have planets placed there, whatever that planet symbolizes, it will be a source of weeping for them. So, say the Lord of Children is there, or mother or father, etc. Well, those subjects tend to be one that people wish were different. There's some serious sorrow attached with them. So I think, everyone's charts, we have all these great things and all these challenging things. That is definitely one of Taylor's. Now, another very strong thing, she has a very supreme Saraswati yoga. Saraswati, we have to remember, is the goddess of wisdom, art, music, singing, learning, all these things. It's quite strong in her chart. Saraswati yoga, this yoga of learning and wisdom, and also music and writing and things, it involves 3 planets. It involves Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. And for this yoga to be formed, these 3 planets need to be in a positive house, and by extension we include the 2nd and 11th house. Now, why this is such a big deal in her chart, one is that we have a proper Saraswati yoga. 2 is that 2 of these planets, Jupiter and Mercury, are in this super sambandha, and they're also associated with these yogas for success. Like, they're very strong. They're very, very strong. So it's not just that she has this Saraswati yoga, it's that she has an extreme example of it in that they're very strong. And one principle we know to be true in the realm of charts is that the more yogas a planet or planets partake in, it's almost like those planets receive a nice bolstering, right? Like they're made stronger. So this Jupiter and Mercury are in Saraswati yoga. They're involved with several DKAs. They're in a Parivartana yoga. This is a real deal in her chart. So that is also very strong. She has this Gajakesari yoga, this Jupiter and Moon together. Now, this is a common yoga, but because it's her Lagnesha, and again, that Jupiter is involved in so many yogas, that's also a really big deal. Now, but wait, there's more. It's not like she needed more, but now we have to remember that when we have Parivartana yoga, it's as though both planets are virtually also in their home place, right? So Jupiter's here in a sign of Gemini. Mercury's here in a sign of Jupiter. Well, because it's like they're coming back home, it's as though Jupiter is here in its own house. Virtually, it's like Jupiter is sitting there. And it's like virtually Mercury is sitting here in her 7th house. So it creates those DKAs. It creates that nice bond between her and partner. It strengthens that Saraswati yoga. And if Jupiter's sitting here, then you have Hamsa yoga. That's one of the Pancha Mahapurusha yogas, one of the 5 combinations of a great being. Ditto, with that Mercury. You have Bhadra Yoga, one of the Panchamahaprusha yogas. These great yogas for success and fame. And that would also mean that in addition to those two of the five Panchamahaprusha yogas, that her Lagnesha is Swa, or almost Swa, because that would mean that her ruling planet sits in her first house, where it is just supremely strong. We love this. Like, we love this in charts, because this means that she has fantastic utilization. This is great for one's health, for their ability to harness life. When the Lagna Lord is in the first house like that, it tends to make somebody very beautiful, which she would obviously have. So the layers of strength with this combination of that Jupiter Mercury are just supremely strong, like supremely strong, for a variety of reasons. Not to mention that this Mercury has Digbala because it's in the first house. This moon, we would say, is full-ish, because the moon would have been perfectly full if it was here. And then that moon, so it's still fullish. Like, if you went outside, you would see it. Wow, like, look at that beautiful moon. So she's born under a very beautiful moon. Her ruling planet, Jupiter, when it sits with the moon, like, the moon's very happy with that, because it expands. Like, Jupiter expands the moon and protects it and makes the person jovial and content and kind. So in that Jupiter, so because Jupiter's her ruling planet, the moon sitting with it, well, then she reflects those lunar qualities. She's obviously very beautiful, but it would also make her very charming, right? Like, for example, when we go outside at night, nobody goes, "Oh, look at that beautiful Saturn. Isn't Saturn very beautiful? Oh, look at that beautiful Mercury." Nobody says these things, right? But when you go outside and the moon is there, ah, look at the moon. It's so beautiful. So people who are born with a prominent moon, maybe it's here in their first house, maybe it's in their seventh house, which means it's gazing back at the first house. Maybe it's with their Lagnesha. Well, in this case, it's with her ruling planet, her Lagnesha, and it gazes back to her first house. So this makes her very charming, very likable, and also very sensitive. Like, she's undoubtedly a very compassionate and very sensitive person. I recently saw online how she's donated all this money to these food shelves and food pantries in the UK recently, because undoubtedly she is a very compassionate, caring, and I'd even say mothering individual. All of which that moon gives her, that very prominent and that very strong moon. And, the moon is a planet that is very forward facing, right? People who have strong moons, they tend to be very good at like interfacing with the public, interacting with the public, fielding questions, being seen, all these things. There are lots of things to discuss in this chart, but just one more prominent one here is that her nakshatra, her rising nakshatra, is Purva Ashada. This gives people a sense of like sometimes we say like a kapha-like facade. Like, you don't see the emotion that's going on underneath them, right? They're not intentionally hiding anything, but they have this ability to not show their emotion. And it's like they're born with a poker face. This is a bit of a strength, when people have placements there, it's like they're able to not show how affected they are by things. Now, on the flip side, when people like Taylor have this rising, she actually has a double placement there, a triple placement there. This means that in relationship, people like Taylor, like I'm sure Taylor, for example, has this where she needs to show people what she's actually feeling, because she won't intentionally hide it, but she won't show it either. So for people like Taylor, they have to consciously bring in other people into their inner emotional landscape, because they naturally just won't show it, especially when they have placements in Ardra, because I'm sure, despite having tremendous utilization, like she's really somebody who can turn the worst lemons into the best lemonade. Like, hands down, she's a very capable person, make no mistake about it. But in addition to that, she has a really deep emotional landscape. And this would be true regardless when she was born this day. So in rectifying this chart, we have to be careful, because if we said that, oh, she shows this Gemini, well, a number of signs would show the emotionality of that Gemini anyways. But because the moon is there, any of the 12 signs born this day are this sign, or rather show that emotion. So we have to use a lot of discretion when we're doing this. But, this is my brief examination of a very powerful chart. And do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Please post your comments down below. I'm happy to hear them and also to answer questions. And of course, again, remember, please hit that subscribe button. And if you want to do a reading with me and have me show you where you are in life, what's going on, when it's easy, when it's hard, answer all your questions, please, again, that link is below. I'd gladly read your chart. This is what I do for a living. I really enjoy doing it. So thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from you, and have the best day. Namaste.